Welcome to Talk Ottumwa, a production of Greater Ottumwa Partners in Progress. On this podcast, we'll talk about the local businesses in Ottumwa to give you the backstory to their success. We'll also talk about the economic initiatives that are driving the progress of the community. And we'll talk about the issues that the community faces and much more. So stick around and let's talk Ottumwa. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Talk Ottumwa. We talk about economic development all the time on this podcast, and one of the people that's probably most responsible for economic development in the city of Ottumwa we have yet to have on this program. That changes today. With us we have the Director of Community Development, Zach Simonson for the City of Ottumwa. Welcome, Zach.
Hello, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
It's good to have you. Let's start off. One of the things that people talk about in regards to economic development and really sets the stage for everything economic development is where people are going to lay their heads at night, housing. And the Mission 500 group has been around for a couple of years now. And people ask all the time, where does that 500 come from in the name? So I know you were through that whole process. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that 500 number?
Yeah. So we did a housing plan all throughout 2021, approved in 2022. We contracted, the Legacy Foundation contracted with RDG. We brought in experts who have done hundreds of studies to set policy and improvements around housing in different communities all across the country. And they looked at the data for new built housing, the condition of our housing in Ottumwa, age, where rent levels were, where housing cost levels were. They put all the data together and they tried to project need for housing over the next 8 years, the period up until 2030. And they found that by 2030, the City of Ottumwa needed to build 500 units of new housing, in addition to all the other recommendations around improvements of the existing stock, everything else, but 500 units of new housing across a variety of types, across a variety of income categories, but that was where we had to be just to keep pace with the needs of the current population here in Ottumwa and the projected population growth.
Now, setting the population growth aside in Ottumwa, I know one of the things that we have talked about many times over many podcasts, open community forums, things like that, is the current housing stock that we have in Ottumwa. And it's no surprise to anybody, you know, when we do attract new workforce to the area, one of the common complaints that we get is, hey, there's really not any place for me to live in this community. So what ends up happening ultimately is a lot of the people that are coming into Ottumwa, they end up in a bedroom community like Fairfield or Bloomfield or Oskaloosa because there's no housing that they deem appropriate for themselves in Ottumwa. And just so everybody's aware, 87% of our housing stock in the city of Ottumwa was built prior to 1979, and as of a couple of years ago, we haven't really done the math recently, but the median household value in 2020 actually was about $50,000, and obviously that's because the housing inventory is so aged. So with that, there is a housing need across all points. And one of the things that people talk about is, you know, LMI housing or market rate housing, workforce-based housing. Would you mind going into a little bit on the definitions of what all of those mean?
Yeah, so like you said, there's a lot of different needs, and the needs intersect and interact in a lot of ways. Some of the folks that are in the most need are obviously Wapello County is one of the counties in Iowa with, unfortunately, one of the higher rates of homelessness. We can see on the point-in-time surveys that are done annually. I don't like the methodology for the point-in-time count, but it does at least demonstrate that we have pretty significant need for folks that are completely unsheltered here in Ottumwa. We also have a lot of folks, this is something I've learned through the homelessness folks that work at the school district, is we have a lot of folks that are in another category of homelessness where they're not completely unsheltered, but they don't have a place of their own. They're couch surfing or they're living with other family members. trying to find housing. And these, account for dozens of kids in the school district are growing up in that environment. So there's a lot of folks with really critical need there. There's a lot of folks with extremely low income. I got into this work here in Ottumwa on the code enforcement side, which meant I did a lot of rental inspections, and I also got to see the unfortunate conditions that a lot of people still live in this community in terms of derelict housing, whether it's illegally occupying placarded unsafe dwellings or even just people that are paying to rent housing that is completely substandard. So there's a lot of people on the low income side that have a lot of needs around housing, and there's a lot of different approaches to try to help those folks get housing. One is the federal, they call it the Section 8 program, the Housing Choice Voucher. This is an application to participate in a public housing system. You might be able to get placed in public housing units that are owned by the housing authority. That's an older program that over time HUD has tried to make smaller and smaller the amount of housing that's owned by housing authorities, and Section 8 is a part of that. Instead of providing funding to own and operate units to the housing authority, they put the housing authority sort of give it a role in these Section 8 vouchers, which give folks, they call it housing choice, give folks the ability to pay rent to a landlord for housing. So in a sense, it's a subsidy to landlords to take tenants who can't afford all of their rent. And there's a wide variety of ranges that people might be at with a Section 8 voucher. But those can be any types of units as long as they meet a certain type of standard. And that's a challenge we've worked on a little bit, is getting landlords to participate in Section 8. There's also then a whole category of low to moderate income housing units or developments that are new build construction that is meant to kind of fit into that program. And so they're required, they receive quite a bit of money. They receive a really large tax incentive, a tax credit to build these units, to operate them, but they have to follow some rules. There's a few different ways to mix it, but you have to have a certain number of tenants who make 20% or less of area median income, and then 60% or less, and then 80%. And you can kind of mix those numbers a little bit. But then you get fair market rent, and the voucher pays a portion of their rent, and the tenant pays a portion of their rent. And so some of the projects we've seen happen in Ottumwa a little bit have been in that LMI model, Washington Apartments, and the ongoing project at Asbury and Sherwood. Those are participating in that low to moderate income housing program, the low income housing tax credit, LIHTC is what that is. But then there's also a whole other set of housing needs and folks that aren't having their needs totally met, that are not in those critical low income areas, but they still have a lot of challenges with this housing market. And it creates pressure. So you think a little bit about a family that might be around the median income, maybe even a little higher, so they're able to get a mortgage and they're able to find a home. They just don't really have the housing options that they would want to see in Ottumwa. Some of those folks just choose not to live here. Other folks take houses that they're not satisfied with. They take a house that needs a lot of work. They take a house in a neighborhood they might not want to live in. There's a few other things. And when the lower income folks who earn a little less than those folks could have gotten that unit instead, or they're put in a position to compete, they're going to lose. They make less money, but it pushes other people out of home ownership as well. So we want to be able to make sure that those options are available. And there are some incentives around helping to get new housing built that's not in the low income side. And so the Iowa Workforce Housing Tax Credit's a big example there. This is not income restricted, but it does say the state of Iowa will refund up to 10% of the first $150,000 built on new housing in the form of a tax credit. And that housing is market rate. It's meant for folks that are in that workforce category where their needs are just not met by the inventory, just because of the nature of what's on the inventory, not because they don't have an adequate income to get a mortgage or things like that. So there's a lot of different pieces that connect.
Well, and there's a lot of myths or misinformation going around inside the city of Ottumwa. We look at one of the projects that we had that was just constructed not too long ago, and there was the common myth that it was a low-income property. But looking at the median income and what the minimum income requirements were of that property, the minimum income requirements, if memory serves me, was 40 or the low 40s to be in that apartment. The median income in Ottumwa is $53,000. So you're not a low income person being in that apartment. And I think that that's one of the misinformation pieces that people have for what's really market rate or workforce based type housing versus low income housing. And then there's what is considered the market rate housing. And there's the perception in this community that we don't need any of that housing. And it's not because the community doesn't need it, it's because you don't need it. Right. So you kind of say, well, why would we spend money on building $250,000, $300,000 houses? Because I don't need that house, and everybody that I know doesn't need that house. But that's not indicative of the workforce that's coming into Ottumwa, that those people can afford and do want those types of housing. So in some cases, you're building houses not for the people that are here necessarily, but for some of the people that we really want to attract into the community.
Right, and I think that that's something that the state of Iowa's put a little bit of work into, is just putting a face to everybody that's kind of a participant in the housing market, or a participant in some social services in general. Is there's folks at every income category that have an important role in your daily life. So whether you want to say, well, we don't need to build these subsidized units, there's a lot of people that you interact with on a daily basis that meet critical needs that you have, whether they're core functions of your day, things that getting orders at fast food restaurants, interacting with retail, cashiers, these sorts of people add a lot of convenience and add a lot of function to your day, and they're an important part of the economy. On the other end, if you want to have the ability to go to a doctor that you can have your needs met with here in Ottumwa, that is at a local hospital, has qualified nursing, everything else. These are folks that make a pretty significant income, and they also need to have a place to put their heads down at night. And so, it's going to be really hard to attract those and fill those positions at the higher end, at the lower end, all throughout the middle, if there isn't something that is suitable to each of these needs. And in some cases, really, it's either the competition with other earners, which makes for discomfort. It's moving outside of town, which means not just people probably don't stay as long. If you're commuting 30 minutes a day to work in Ottumwa, you're probably not going to stay in that job as long as you would if your commute was 5 minutes. But then it's also they're spending their money outside of the community. They might drive to work in Ottumwa. They might buy lunch in Ottumwa. They might do some of the things that they can't do in Fairfield and Ottumwa, but day to day, they're going to shop in Fairfield.
Yep. And there's something to the definition of the word community. That means everybody. It's not just you. So, but the proof in the pudding of that, and this is one of the areas that we've seen a lot of misinformation, is the downtown housing. I've personally heard people say when we've had open houses in the downtown area where we did the upper story living tours, the rent that you're charging is ridiculous. Nobody is going to pay these rent prices. And really, to exactly your point, there's a waiting list. Every time one of these apartments opens downtown, there's a waiting list, 9 or 10 people deep to get into those apartments. So the market's there. The people want these nice units that are at that market rate point.
Yeah, and I'm a downtown resident, so I definitely see the quality of life amenities that come from that. I love being able to walk to great restaurants. I love being able to do some of my shopping and business downtown right within walking distance of where I live. And I also really love the apartment that I have. I bought my building, but I have a really great apartment. The apartments downtown are in really good condition. And it's a really great way to live. My utilities are extremely efficient because these are newly finished apartments, and also that density lends itself to some great efficiency. So there's a lot of really good things about life downtown, a lot of other great things going on downtown.
There's been a lot of growth in that over the last few years. I think that we're getting ready to touch 120 units downtown now. And again, for the record, those are all full, and there's waiting lists for them. But, making that transition away from the housing piece just a little bit, Downtown has seen a lot of growth over the last 10 years specifically. I've been very vocal in the fact that, the people that have been working downtown have been doing a fantastic job. Downtown was effectively dead 10 years ago. It's probably working on 11 at this point, but that's a very real thing. That's a testament to the people that have been working on it, because no buildings really had owner-occupied apartments in them. No buildings had renters in them. The storefronts were empty, and now that's all changed. And there's a lot of things that are going into that. One of those is the self-supported tax district that's down there that's helping maintain it. Do you want to talk about that for just a second?
Yeah, I think it's a good time to talk about the Self-Supporting Municipal Improvement District, the SMID district downtown, because that's up to be renewed here over the course of this next year. And it really, I think, is a testament to what you said, which is that there's been tremendous progress downtown. So Iowa code allows for a commercial district, commercial property owners to decide to tax themselves a larger tax. And that's what we have downtown. Enough property owners petitioned to establish a district where a tax of up to an additional $3 per thousand of assessed value is collected and put into a fund that can only be used on projects that are decided by a committee of property owners and Main Street in downtown Ottumwa. And so that district has existed for 5 years. They've done some really cool projects. They built the trash enclosure for the 3rd Street Market Street parking lot, which really resolved some issues that property owners had there with getting trash collected, keeping that alley and that parking lot area looking good. That was a really good project. They've also done the electric vehicle cart that the maintenance folks use downtown to keep the plants watered, to do the things that they do. They've done trash receptacles, ashtrays, those sorts of things that keep that part of the neighborhood looking beautiful. And then they've also contributed to the Business Builder Academy that helps to build new entrepreneurship and help entrepreneurs at kind of an incubator or classroom type environment flesh out their idea and build their business. And that's translated into new businesses that have already opened downtown. So it's been a really good way of continuing to build on that value. And the fact that it's established by the property owners, and we've received another petition by a significant number of those property owners, well over the minimum threshold, I think is testament to the fact that folks have faith and confidence that it's going to continue to grow. By square foot or by acre, valuation growth downtown is the fastest and greatest than anywhere else in the community.
Well, and the funny thing about that is that I want to address the negativity in the community for just a second, because there are times when you want to slap your head for it, but there are also times when it's really kind of humorous, because looking at what Ottumwa was 10 years ago, again for downtown district, there wasn't a lot down there. So since that point, we've had facade improvements, we've had street improvements, the businesses have reinvested in the district, the city's reinvested in the district. And there's still some open storefronts. Nobody can deny that. But taking this point in time against what it was 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, there's a significant improvement. But everybody looks at the point in time and says, oh, there's 10 empty storefronts downtown, then nothing must be working. We've got to step away from that and realize that growth does take time, and the proof is in the pudding. We have seen that growth. The business owners and the property owners themselves believe in this enough that they're willing to tax themselves for it, and it's paying dividends for them.
Yeah, and I think it's really it's a process. Main Street is a process. The Main Street Iowa, the organization, is based on an approach to economic revitalization in downtowns that's demonstrated, and that approach, it takes time. And I think about our role in the city, and it's a timeline thing. We have incentives that kind of fit in at different parts of that timeline, but we take each building, and one of the most critical needs to making sure that buildings downtown stay standing is the roof. These are 100-year-old buildings. The walls probably pretty structurally sound. They've been up for a long time, but the biggest threat to the building envelope is the roof. And so we have an incentive to help make sure that those buildings, we can do up to 50%, up to $10,000 for the roof, because we want to protect that building envelope and protect the condition of the building. And so that's kind of the first step. And we had that roof program as the first program downtown because we wanted to reduce the deterioration. We wanted to stop the forces that were causing us to have to demolish buildings downtown. The south side of the 300 block of Main Street, so the block that had that's right by the Jefferson Street Bridge on the south side of the street, was almost demolished. It was scheduled for demolition. We had the estimate of what all of it would cost, and there was going to be nothing there. And that's when Main Street started, was around the same time that that was going to be demolished. And so we had to protect those buildings first. Then we have to make those buildings attractive to do things in. And the economics of it right now, the housing is the thing that is a more steady source of income. So we've seen some of the housing go into buildings first. But we also have things to help with the facade and the white box to make these buildings look appealing to open retail business, and we're starting to see those retail businesses come in. There's always ups and downs. There's businesses that come, there's businesses that go, but we have seen the trend generally to be in the direction of more and more, and that's the way we want to continue to make it go. One thing we've heard a lot of attention around is folks wanted to have more options for dining downtown, and so the newest incentive we have is an incentive around restaurant equipment to take some of the largest cost for the semi-permanent restaurant equipment, the things that could still stay if that restaurant isn't successful and the next restaurant wanted to try in the same space. So things like grease interceptors, Ansel systems for fire suppression, things that could be of use much longer into the future, we'll give an incentive to help install that equipment. So,
And for the record, what is that incentive?
it's up to $25,000. Pretty substantial, and that's because first, the cost is pretty substantial for that equipment, but also because we've heard very loudly that there's that need. Mm-hmm. And we also know that having dining downtown is really important to having a 24-hour or at least, 18-hour downtown. I don't think that we necessarily have any overnight businesses. We have people living downtown. So we want to have activity downtown most of the day. We want to have things during the business day, but we also need to have things that keep traffic downtown later into the evening. Hopefully that'll also encourage other retail and entertainment businesses to stay open later into the evening as well. But we want to have all that activity. Main Street, Iowa has a really interesting tool that other Main Street communities use as well, which is an economic model for calculating the economic impact of having vacant space. Because it's not just lost rent, it's not just lost valuation or the space deteriorates. There's a tax professional, there's an attorney, there's everybody who doesn't get to serve a business that could be there. There's all the ancillary businesses that would benefit from something being there. One thing I really enjoyed learning about at a conference recently was how in a lot of main streets where there's a property owner that might own several buildings, a lot of those owners are willing to rent to a coffee shop at a lower lease rate than they would per square foot for another business, because that coffee shop specifically brings in a lot of business to a downtown area that helps to support other businesses. And being in proximity to a coffee shop helps them fill their other vacancies. And so all these things interact, and we want to have that healthy mix downtown, and restaurants are a big part of it.
Yeah. Sometimes volume is more important than the per customer count.
Yep.
So, speaking of, we talked a little bit about downtown, but then there's the natural extension of downtown for the city of Ottumwa, at least, and that's the Church Street district. It's created its own identity over the past few decades, and it's an area that has started to get a little bit more of attention over the last year or so. Do you want to talk about some of the things that have been happening over in the Church Street district?
Yeah, and I think GoPip's really been huge on putting the attention back onto Church Street and organizing meetings for Church Street business and property owners to try to get their needs met. But Church Street's in a great position because of the proximity to Greater Ottumwa Park, because of the proximity to Bridgeview Center. I think that it's kind of a natural arts and entertainment area because it's so close to these things. It's a natural place for businesses that support recreation because of the proximity to the park. And it's on the south side, which is much more densely populated than the north side of town. So there's a lot of folks that live really close by to serve businesses. And it's a different character on the south side. There's different demographics, there's different needs. And so those businesses can support those needs. And Church Street has typically had a higher occupancy ratio. They've had fewer vacancies on Church Street, but they've had some difficult, persistent vacancies. But they've generally had fewer, I think, because the rent can be a little bit cheaper. Some of the buildings, they have less expensive needs. And there's some other things that go into that. But Church Street, I think, has a lot of opportunities, and there's been some work going on around increasing safety, increasing mobility. Downtown Ottumwa has a much higher what they call walkability score, which is factors proximity to services, but also factors, the presence of sidewalks, the presence of bicycle lanes, access to transportation, public transit type services. And Church Street doesn't score quite as high. The crosswalks are a big issue that's going to get attention going forward. And then there's also, especially on the backside toward the lagoons, there's been, some concern around safety in that area because that parking lot butts right up to the park, which is,
not
as
well
the sun
lit.
goes down, not especially, it doesn't feel as safe back there. And so making sure that we can improve that as well, I think is going to be of value to the folks that own property around there. And I think it's going to keep more people there, like I said, and maybe be able to extend some of those hours that things operate.
Yeah, and Church Street, just for a comprehensive planning perspective, so everybody understands, looking forward of what the next 2-3 years look like for the city of Ottumwa. We have a sports complex that's going to create regional tourism that's going to be right next to the beach. So that's going to increase traffic down into that area. We have a competition soccer field that's going to be right over in that area as well. So the volume of traffic that we have coming into that area specifically is going to increase. Bridgeview Center is really starting to pick up, so to speak, on the volume of people that they're having coming in. With the hotel coming there as well, we'll see more conferences. So having a little bit of a bird's eye view of what Church Street needs to look like over the next 5-10 years, and the things that the city of Ottumwa really needs to do to help support that effort is really important for us moving forward if we really want to talk about positive small business economic development in the community.
Yeah. And one thing that we have kind of looked at a little bit as an upcoming goal as well is a historical survey of that area. And the reason that can be valuable is you think about all the facade transformations that have happened on Main Street and the way Main Street used to have that boarded up character where in the 70s, I don't know what people were doing that made them think it was a good idea, but they put all of these metal panel things over the top of these beautiful masonry facades.
That became great spots for pigeons.
Yeah, they boarded up every transom window they could find. I don't understand what was going on, but something happened, and all those buildings lost a lot of the character that they had. And it took a lot of investment to change that. And the first step toward getting any of the state incentives for the really transformational facade programs is Section 106 historical review, and also doing the design that suits the needs that they want around historical redevelopment. And so one thing we want to do is come in and do the same thing we did on Main Street to catalyze those programs, starting with the historical survey and starting with an idea of how each building could look if it were opened back up and done to look at more original or done to look more appropriate. We want to do the same type of thing on Church Street and open up those opportunities to make that part of town also go through a nice revitalization transformation that'll increase values, increase a lot of the things that are going to make it an attractive place to be.
Yeah. So with that, we've talked about, the small businesses downtown. We've talked about the small businesses in Church Street. We have 6 business districts in Ottumwa. So let's talk about a couple of those other business districts. And when we talk about these business districts, we're talking about some of the national chains, the national retail recruiting. Ottumwa, the last 6 months or so, we've been very privileged to have seen the opening of TJ Maxx and Five Below, which has been a real catalyst for the city as far as retail development. And the reason for that is because it allows us to prove to the country that we can withstand some of that retail development here. And the City of Ottumwa, in concert with the Legacy Foundation, signed a contract last year to bring in retail strategies into the City of Ottumwa and work with us to help bring in some of that new business. Do you want to talk about that for just a sec?
Yeah, so retail recruiting, especially when we're looking at national retailers, is a completely different game than necessarily filling our downtown businesses. A lot of that is helping to incubate the folks that we already have now with great ideas for small businesses to open up downtown. When we're talking about bringing in national brand to do retail business in the Quincy or Venture Drive areas, one of the key parts of that is making contact with the broker who represents the national brand in this area, and then maintaining that contact and that relationship and understanding what they're looking for, understanding their pattern of growth. All these sorts of things require relationships and expertise that doesn't exist on the local level for a variety of reasons. But we have now partners who have years-long relationships with tenant representatives, with brokers that can put Ottumwa in the mix when retailers are looking to grow, and we're seeing some success come from that already. And these retailers right now are looking at the same environment and the same economy that I think we all are looking at, and they're not growing as fast as they were in a different environment, but there's still opportunities for growth, and there's still certain businesses that are doing really well and that are still looking to grow, and so we're trying to fit the right ones of those with the right economy. And they have really specific needs that they want to have met, and some of those needs are very, very firm. Some of them we can't get our way around. We can't bring in a chain restaurant that serves really good salad and breadsticks that people like, because one thing they look for is a lot of people with a really high income, and they settle in communities that have an adequate number of people of a really high income, and we're not quite there yet on the demographic side. So that's a conversation that's really hard to get our foot in the door with.
It's interesting because there are you hear certain names over and over again about, we need this business in Ottumwa, we should be able to have this business in Ottumwa. But from the other side of it, I know you and I both have seen this. We look at the spec sheets for those companies, and they don't even want to talk to a community that doesn't have, for example, a population density of 75,000 people within 5 miles of their particular location. They don't want to be someplace on top of that 75,000 that doesn't have a minimum of average car count of 25,000 cars driving in front of their store a day. These are non-starters for them. If they don't have it, they're not going to do it. They expect a certain income, like you said. But there's another thing that I find interesting that a lot of people I don't think about is some of these chains, specifically with restaurants. Everybody has their favorite restaurant they want to come to town, but some of these restaurants require local buy-in on that as well. So, they're not just going to bring we'll just say Buffalo Wild Wings into Ottumwa. I think all of us agree that would be fantastic, but they operate under a franchisee model of expansion. So they might approve the community, they might not, but they may approve the community from a corporate standpoint, but at the end of the day, they still want that local buy-in. So if there's no franchisee in the area that's willing to put the money up, then they're still not going to come to the market.
Right, and the whole franchise system, I think, could be and probably should be, and maybe not with me, a podcast of its own, because there's a lot of moving parts there. We're
working on that.
Yeah, because there's even there's the way that it could fit in where somebody could own the franchise rights to this territory and also own the rights to another adjacent territory, and they might want to hold on to the rights to open that franchise in Ottumwa but never do it because they're already in Oskaloosa and they don't want to, do any cannibalization of their own business. But also thinking about, the stores having these particular needs that they want to meet. The really great thing that we have is some of those needs can be overcome if we can get in a relationship and start a conversation, because the population of Ottumwa is 25,000. If somebody says, well, I'm going to look at places to open a new fast food restaurant, my needs are communities of 40,000 or larger, and then they try to do their own research and choose communities, we're already going to be off their list. They're never going to look at us because we're under that 40,000. But when we can go face to face, or our partners can go face to face or on the phone and say, we know you're looking to open 11 restaurants across the country this year. We want you to look at Ottumwa, Iowa, population 20,000, but here's this cell data that we use that shows the retail trade area is about 70,000. There's people that drive to Ottumwa to do their weekly grocery run, and that's about 70,000 people that are doing the bulk of their retail business here in Ottumwa. Their preferred Walmart is here in Ottumwa. Their preferred grocery store is here in Ottumwa. And those are people that they can capture for that fast food restaurant as well. When they can build that story, they can break down some of those walls and they can make those things softer. Same thing with location. They can start to say, you're looking for this number of vehicles per day. I get that, but this is the pattern of transit in this community. And yeah, there aren't 15,000 vehicles passing by this particular corner every day because there's that other corner 3 blocks away that feeds in a similar way, but you put that sign up, you're still going to have visibility, you're still going to be able to draw them. You're going to make those 15,000 vehicles by having your store there. They can start to tell those stories, and I think that that's the strong thing that we get from our relationship with Retail Strategies. And Mark and I have gotten to go and work face to face and side by side with these guys at trade shows and see how that face-to-face interaction can start to break down some of those barriers.
Yeah, it's interesting. Going back to your point of having the relationships that they have with those national retailers. The first time we went out to one of those conferences, I remember sitting down with a particular developer group for a chain of hotels, and they talked to us, I think, out of pleasantry, but they really didn't put any seriousness into us. We went back to them the second year, but the difference was in the second year, we had somebody from Retail Strategies with us, and they took us seriously all of a sudden. I don't think it was anything different in our approach. I think it was just the fact that we had that trusted source with us, so we became more credible just by that.
Yeah, I think there's definitely been value in that relationship that way. And there's also just been so much learning opportunity. Retail recruiting on the national side was not something the city or the chamber or GoPip was involved in at the same level before. And so now the ability that we've developed and the vocabulary we have and the understanding of how the deals come together, we can check in and even have a pretty brief conversation with someone, and we can understand, why is the deal not coming together? Or is it lease terms? Is it, what's going on? What's happening? And we can speak in an educated way about that. And I think that's really been professional development, but it's also had a lot of value for the community, is that we're able to now play that game at the level that it takes to get things done, because we're able to find a partner like Retail Strategies because there are other cities that are also looking for a partner like that. It's something that scales up to the point where they can make a business out of it, and that means if they're doing it, they're out competing us unless we're playing the same game.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we've talked about a lot, Zach, and I want to go to the last topic. And I want to load this just a little bit, so bear with me a second. We've talked about the need for housing. We are at a premium for housing in the city of Ottumwa right now. We've got to build more. We have talked about retail development, which really kind of falls under that whole quality of life umbrella. We need more of that in the community, and we need to continue to foster what's already here. With that comes workforce. The workforce was a topic with housing, and all of that feeds into industrial development in Ottumwa. There has been the mantra for decades in the city of Ottumwa: we need more industrial, we need more industrial, we need more industrial. But we also need housing, we need workforce, we need quality of life amenities, and we need space to actually build a facility, which is something that, again, is at a premium in the city of Ottumwa. We don't have that much infill space that we could actually build a manufacturing facility. We are fortunate that we do have one 80-acre plot at the edge of town that is suited for industrial development, which is called Helgerson Flats. It's site certified through the state of Iowa. And that is an area that we can hopefully at some point in the future develop into industrial / warehousing type growth. But the big thing is industrial development comes probably secondary to some of this other stuff. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that these issues are so interconnected that when we try to have conversations around opening new industrial operations that have a large number of employees, the questions that come up are some of the ones that you would expect there. Well, what do you have for property? What do you have for an incentive around tax abatement for us to build this millions and millions of dollars of operation? Those sorts of questions, those are what you kind of expect. But then there's also a ton of questions that come up around, we want to hire 300, 400, 500 employees. Do you have 300, 400, 500 skilled employees that can fill these roles?
Skilled is an important word.
Yeah. And then it's, do you have housing if we're going to be attracting new people to town to fill these roles? Do you have the kind of schools that these people are going to want to send their kids to? Do you have the kind of post-secondary education that we're going to be able to have our employees do the training to learn the skills and to develop that workforce or improve it? Is this a community people want to live in? Are people going to stay here for the long haul, and we can trust that our managers, our project directors are going to be in the community and satisfied to live here? Those are questions that these companies are looking at. And then they're also looking at our values. They're looking at, is enough of our energy green that they can open up a plant here and still say that they're meeting their goals around renewables? There's so many things that each of these businesses look at, and we have to understand all of those needs, and we have to check all of those boxes, because if we can't, there's someone else that can.
And I think the one thing that we really need to be cognizant of when we're talking about growth from an industrial perspective specifically is we have several anchor businesses in Ottumwa. We have JBS, we have John Deere, we have Wimco Tank, we have CNC Machining, we have Max Spas. These are all businesses that are providing high quality jobs in the community. The last thing that we want to do as a city is exploit those resources and cause potential damage to those businesses just to get another business in the community. It does no good for the city of Ottumwa to lose someplace like John Deere, having 500 employees move away from there and causing a 100-year-old business to leave Ottumwa just so we could get another new business in town. That makes no sense. We have to make sure that while we are growing, be it retail or industrial, it doesn't really matter, that we are still protecting the businesses that were here first.
Yeah, I think that is a really important part of it. And I think that it's all about making sure that we're looking really smart for the types of businesses that suit our workforce, that suit our locations. You talked about Helgerson Flats. Another opportunity we have for potential industrial growth is out at the airport. And with it being the airport, we should think about the ways in which it doesn't necessarily have to directly serve or be helped by the airport, but if it can, that's great. We have space available for somebody who might be making an aerospace product. It would be a natural fit. We also have the potential to be a place where shipping, logistics businesses that use the airport would be a good fit there. So we want to make sure that we're using our resources smart and we're going after the right things. And I think that's something that has been an important role for GoPip and doing the airport study and things like that is about setting priorities with Helgerson Flats around what we are able to serve with the infrastructure we have, what fits the infrastructure we have, and then what fits every other component of that long list of things that goes into making a business want to come to be in a community.
The conversation really, to me, is number one, refreshing, and number two, gives me hope for the future of Ottumwa, because I'll use my dying breath saying this. The people who say Ottumwa is dying, they're absolutely wrong. They've got their eyes closed, and it's going to come soon enough. One by one, we'll transform those people, because we are thinking about the right things here in Ottumwa. We used to think about only industrial development, but we didn't think about housing. And, people might challenge me on that, but I would go to the housing permits and say, prove me wrong, because there were years when we only had 4 houses that were being constructed. The concentration wasn't there. That has changed. We're looking at an RFP process right now for what was the St. Joe Hospital project, and we're already looking past that what could be the next infill development that we can create houses. The City of Ottumwa has taken the stance that we're going to actively try to recruit the retail business. We have been actively transforming the downtown district. We're starting to look at the Church Street district. So all those components are there, and that's fantastic for the City of Ottumwa. So I think that the conversation that we have 5 years from now revolving around economic development is going to be a much different conversation than we have now.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree there. I think that anyone that thinks the best days in Ottumwa have already happened, I think, is wrong. And I think that there's a lot of still walls we have to break through. There's some headwinds in the economy that are a challenge at this moment. But the fact that we're continuing to make progress against that makes me really excited about when we're able to break some of those last couple barriers, and then when we're also going to find ourselves in one of those economic up times, because they're always come. And I think we're going to be in such a great position that I think the opportunities are really going to be transformative.
Yeah, and the proof in the pudding there is we just released a report a couple of months ago. There's $137 million worth of commercial growth in Ottumwa between 2023 and 2024, which is a 20-some year high. Even in this current economy, it's a 20-some year high. On top of that, we have another $20+ million worth of residential growth in the community. So Ottumwa's on its way up.
And there's definitely projects still in the pipeline, and they're getting a little bit harder, but they're not stopping. So
yeah, exactly.
I'm very very bullish on the future of Ottumwa for sure.
Well, do you have anything else you'd like to add, Zach?
No, I guess the only thing I would just say is from the staff at the city, we're really excited to work on all these types of projects. We always have an open door. I imagine the audience here includes a lot of business owners who are keeping the pulse of development in the community. And if you have projects, expansion, ideas, things you're working on, we're really happy to collaborate on those and to see where our space can be to help. So anyone's welcome, and we're really excited to make sure that you're a part of the growth that's coming.
All right. Well, thanks, Zach, and everybody that's listening, stay tuned for the next exciting episode of Talk Ottumwa. Greater Ottumwa Partners in Progress would like to thank the following Signature Circle investors who help us deliver on our mission to advance the prosperity of the Ottumwa region: Cargill Incorporated, Seafirst Credit Union, Elliott Oil Company, John Deere, McCune and Reed Insurance, Ottumwa Regional Health Center, the Ottumwa Legacy Foundation, South Ottumwa Savings Bank, City of Ottumwa, and the Wapello County Board of Supervisors. Please visit www.gopip.org to keep up on community events, podcasts, and everything Ottumwa.